Welcome and thank you for joining us. I'm Rick Molineux and joining me today is Olivia Monro, and we're from Cluey Learning, where we provide personalised one-to-one and small group online tutoring. We specialise in helping school children in Australia catch up, keep up and excel in the core subjects of mathematics and English as well as chemistry. In this video, we'll be discussing how you can turn your child into a strong reader and writer. My background is in primary teaching and school leadership, and I've worked in a variety of schools, both in Australia and Europe. In my role at Cluey, I'm primarily responsible for overseeing the production of our primary learning programs, as well as making sure that our content is fully aligned to the curriculum. Olivia, perhaps you could let us know a little bit about your background and role here at Cluey.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. I've been involved in teaching and educating students for around 10 years, including leading English teams at 2 schools, as well as teaching VCE English here in Victoria. I've taught English at all years from 7 to 12, and at Cluey, I'm currently working on creating English content for our new secondary English group programs.
Today, we'll start by discussing some of the common perceptions and approaches to literacy education throughout the primary and secondary years, and then talk through some practical strategies that can really help strengthen reading and writing skills. Now, magical might sound like an overstatement, but actually, we are continually seeing more and more evidence of the power of reading, and we can be confident that reading is a really strong foundation for writing skills, no matter how children learn. And as children continue to grow, strength in reading offers a deep understanding of language and of narrative. It provides a pathway into other academic disciplines and can, in this age of the internet, eventually open the door to the sum of human knowledge. Now, if that doesn't sound magical, I don't know what does.
So, Rick, perhaps I could start us off by asking you, what are some of the common perceptions and approaches to literacy education?
Thanks, Olivia. This is a great place to start and is certainly something I give a lot of thought to. As educators, we often encounter attitudes towards literacy education that lean more towards the functional side of the scale. For example, people understand that reading is a skill that children must acquire, and they dedicate the necessary time to helping them learn the fundamentals. Within primary schools, and particularly the early years, this usually means working through a reading program provided by the school. There can be a lot of pressure to complete the reading scheme. That is, to race through the numbered or leveled reading books as quickly as possible so that children can be declared independent readers. For many children, this is a successful process and it's a source of pride and achievement, and they soon enter the world of words and books with enthusiasm and wonder. I've seen many people perceive this as the end of a process. They think of it as the job done or the mission accomplished. I've also seen many students read passages from books beautifully, not missing a beat or mispronouncing a word. So in some respects, this perception might be accurate. But it's also been my experience that if we scratch the surface, we often find that this impressive ability to decode letters on a page and translate them into words can disguise a much less developed ability to make meaning from those words or understand them. And unfortunately, it's usually at this point in a child's education that adults tend to stop reading with children, both at school and at home. So no one really has an opportunity to notice that there might be a disconnect there. If left unchecked, this can certainly continue through the primary years. Would you say this is something you've encountered too, Olivia?
Yes, absolutely. In the secondary context, there tends to be an assumption that students already know how to read and that they have reached the end of that road. However, while they may have learnt the mechanics of how to read, they still need to continue to develop their ability to comprehend what they're reading. And in particular, as they read more complex texts and texts which require them to infer a lot more of the meaning for themselves, or to be able to read between the lines, as we say. This is the point where you'll often see students able to read every word on the page, but not always able to explain what they have read. So comprehension really becomes the focus at this stage. As texts get longer across the secondary years, if you have a reluctant reader or a child who finds reading difficult, this can really have a big impact on their attitude to learning. It's important to remember that strong reading and writing skills are important across all subjects, not just English or humanities-based subjects. At this point in a child's education, as parents begin to find it hard to get their children to read, One thing I'm often asked about is using audiobooks as an alternative to reading the set texts for school. And while this can be a helpful approach, it is really important that they are used to support a student in reading a text rather than replacing it. And that's for a few reasons. Firstly, the process in your brain is quite different when you're listening than when you're reading. So it's not a substitute for reading, and it will not by itself develop their reading skills. And secondly, there will be times when a student needs to work with texts that don't have an audiobook available. So it's vital that they don't become too reliant on them. Instead, if you choose to use an audiobook to support your child in reading a school text, ensure that they're reading along with the audiobook rather than just listening to it, and have conversations with them about the text to ensure that they're absorbing the information. Students need to be able to read and synthesize information in just about every subject. And given that English is generally compulsory up to year 12, as well as there being a minimum English score for entry to many university courses, it really is an important area for students to develop solid skills. And of course, beyond school, employers are looking for strong communication skills in just about every field. Perhaps it might be worth taking a moment here to talk about the approach we take at Cluey towards supporting the development of reading and writing skills. Could you tell us a bit more about that, Rick?
Sure. We believe that rich texts written by accomplished authors are central to the development of strong reading and writing skills. And that's why we've built our English learning programs around them. We believe that a love of reading can be encouraged by working with a wide variety of texts, so we choose carefully and try to use ones that cater to a variety of topics and interests. We like to make sure that the texts we use provide diverse perspectives in narrative, and that we showcase different kinds of texts that are created for different purposes and audiences. For us, reading and writing are really two sides of the same coin. By doing one, you're also learning about the other. So it's important to do both as often as possible. And that's why we provide our students with opportunities to read and write in every session. By looking in detail at how accomplished authors have created and composed their works, creating purposeful effects and experiences for their audiences, students can begin to understand how to apply similar techniques to their own work. We cover all the fundamentals of grammar and punctuation, but also look specifically at what makes writing good, how authors can create enjoyable experiences for their audiences. Having a deep understanding of these techniques really helps students as they make the transition from primary through to secondary. Olivia, you're currently working on developing our group programs for secondary English, which launched just this year. Would you agree with that?
Yes, Rick, reading good writing is such an important part of students developing their own writing skills. I definitely agree with that. It helps develop their vocabulary as well as exposing them to different forms and styles of writing and a variety of language techniques. While the activities in our sessions will vary from one session to another, in many of our group sessions, we begin by reading a short piece of writing together and then analysing the different aspects of what the writer has done to construct their piece. We also discuss the writing to ensure that students have clearly understood what they have read. We then complete a variety of activities that give the students an opportunity to practice those language techniques for themselves, including through a short piece of their own writing. So, Rick, what are some of the ways that primary parents can help strengthen reading and writing skills with their children at home?
Well, when it comes to reading with young children, it's really impossible to overdo it. The more adults read with children, the better. But families lead busy lives, and it can be a challenge to set aside enough time. Generally, the guidelines are that you should read daily with younger children, but that doesn't always mean you should read huge volumes of text. There are a lot of techniques that adults can use to set children up for success. And even if your reading time is only 10 minutes, you can still do a lot. A great way to start is to set up by introducing the book. So take about a minute to talk through the illustrations, the title, read the blurb and talk about the author, talk about any unusual words or read a word here and there as your child flips through the pages, and you can discuss characters, make predictions, just engage in some book talk. That's a really good way to set things up to start. Once your child starts reading, You can provide encouragement, but try to avoid judging your child's reading with words like good or excellent or getting better. Instead, say things about the strategies your child uses when reading, such as, I liked how you sounded it out when you came to that difficult word, or I really like how you changed your voice to be like the different characters in the story. Or you could also say, I noticed that you reread that part that didn't make sense. These were all great strategies. Try to resist the urge to correct every error in real time. Instead, allow your child to take their time, remind them of the strategies they know. So often, with the best of intentions, parents teach their children that the most effective reading strategy is to wait for an adult to read it for them. And you can spot this in children who stop looking at the page and look to an adult when they come across an unfamiliar word. You really want to develop a range of reading strategies with your child, and it's important to keep in mind that while sounding out is a powerful strategy and one of the first ones students learn, it's not the only one, and it doesn't always work with the English language. Rather than providing instant corrections, you could question whether something sounded right. Did it make sense? Look at the beginning sounds and ending sounds. Really teach your child to be inquisitive about errors rather than to avoid, rush past, or worst of all, fear them. If your child is reading independently and has reached the level of chapter books, it's not really necessary for you to read together daily anymore. But that's not to say that you shouldn't continue to share reading time together or talk about the books your child is reading. You could have them share their favourite part or something they found really funny. You should focus much more on their understanding and comprehension during this phase, and in particular, a child's ability to read between the lines. What message is the author communicating in the book? What's the big picture? What are your thoughts on helping secondary students with reading, Olivia?
Yeah, in the secondary years, the biggest challenge really is often getting them to read at all. We all know how powerful the distractions of technology can be, and that picking up a book can seem like a less exciting option. But there are a lot of things you can do to counter this. We also know that it's a good idea for all of us to have some time away from screens before bed, and this is the perfect time for winding down with a book. Encouraging students to read either their set school text or something of their choice for 15 to 20 minutes before bed can be a really effective strategy and will become a habit over time. Having a follow-up conversation about what they have read is a good way to check in and see if they're comprehending what they are reading. By telling you about it in their own words, they're also practicing the key skill of summarising the information. You can then connect what they have read with their own experiences by asking follow-up questions like, have you ever felt like that? Or have things like that ever happened at your school? Making those connections can help students become more engaged and interested in the text. It can also help if you read the text yourself, so that you can have a more detailed conversation about it, and you can help to identify if your student is understanding the text or not. I would also encourage students to read widely with not just the set school texts. And a great way to do this is to find books and magazines about an area of interest. This might be sport or horses or gaming or whatever it is your child is interested in. We always encourage students to read a range of different text types, and within any topic or area of interest, you can find these. For example, in his late primary to early teen years, my son was obsessed with two things, dogs and gaming, and this was the really early days of Minecraft. So he would read novels about dogs, procedural texts about how to train a dog, and informational texts about different dog breeds, PlayStation magazine, and the Guinness Book of World Records Gamers Edition. Whereas my son was not a keen reader, but for him, he absolutely loved cricket and footy. So biographies of his favourite sports stars were a really good choice to keep him engaged. So by working with your child's interests, reading becomes much more appealing and pleasurable, and it can be part of their existing interest rather than just something they associate with school. Creating positivity around reading is so important. So, Rick, what are your thoughts about how parents can support younger children in developing their writing skills?
Well, as with reading, when it comes to writing, the more you do together, the better. And the great thing about writing is you can do it all the time. If children enjoy being imaginative, give them opportunities to read stories they've written aloud, and you can sit back and listen. Listen with a focus on the messages they're trying to express, and comment on what they've done well. For example, you could say, I enjoyed how you use interesting words, or the character you created seems so real, I can imagine how she looks. Leave comments about spelling and punctuation and grammar to another time. They're important when a work is published for a wider audience, but children can become demoralized and put off if it's the only focus when they share their creative work. Also keep in mind that certain types of errors should actually be expected as children move through the primary years. It takes a long time to master the details of writing, so be patient. Writing can still be fun, engaging and expressive. Experimentation with grammar and punctuation is common and should be encouraged. On the other hand, a complete disregard for grammar and punctuation is also quite common, and this really shouldn't be indulged for too long. Urge younger children to express complete ideas one at a time, and once they master this, then encourage them to experiment with more complex compositions to add detail to their ideas. Imaginative writing isn't the only option either. Writing is everywhere in the world, so when you're out and about, draw your child's attention to how writing is presented, for example, in brochures, on billboards, in books and in the media. These are all models for writing for real purposes. Above all, you can show your child that writing is a highly valued activity in your home. Show children how you use writing every day. Write shopping lists, leave messages or poems for each other, write letters, cards or emails to loved ones. I'll hand over to you, Olivia, so you can offer some of your ideas for older students.
Thanks, Rick. When it comes to writing, secondary students will likely be doing longer writing tasks at school, such as persuasive writing, text response essays, language analysis, and narratives. So, talking with them about the different types of writing they are doing and the differences between them can help consolidate what they're learning. Asking them to show you what they're working on and to read it out loud to you, as Rick suggested for younger students, can help you stay engaged with what they're doing at school, which certainly becomes more challenging in the secondary years. Again, it's best to avoid any language that may be perceived as criticism, remembering that teenagers can be very sensitive about their work, and instead focus on the strengths of what they have written. Ask them about why they have chosen to write what they did and how they have incorporated what they've learnt at school into their own work.
Thanks so much, Olivia. This has been a really interesting discussion, and thanks everyone for watching. If you have any questions about today's topic, feel free to add them to the comment section below, or you can email us directly and someone from the education team will get back to you with an answer as soon as we can. That brings us to the end of our video. We hope you found it helpful.